There is a strange sorrow that lives inside every man who dreams of greatness. It is not the fear of failure. It is not the exhaustion from long hours, the solitude, or the sacrifices. It is the cold, silent realization that no matter how much he builds, how far he rises, or how deep he thinks, he may still go to bed alone. Not because he is unworthy, but because his greatness in itself is threatening. Not admired, not adored, but resented. And so we begin with this brutal, uncomfortable idea. Most women do not want great men. Not truly. They may admire his achievements, quote his books, follow his conquests, but they often do not want to live beside his inner storms. They want the myth, not the man. This is not a war of the sexes. It is a deeper human paradox. We crave greatness from afar, yet struggle to coexist with it up close, especially when it wears the face of a man who cannot, will not, choose comfort over vision. But why is that? Why do so many men who devote their lives to mastery, ambition, and purpose often feel misunderstood, unloved, or even punished in intimacy? This is not just a modern question. It is ancient, timeless. The bones of this question lie in the dust of empires and the pages of forgotten letters. Napoleon Bonaparte, the ruthless genius who redrew the map of Europe, wrote desperate, aching love letters to a woman who never truly loved him back the way he needed. He won battles with thousands of men, but could not win the heart of Josephine. And he is not alone. From Marcus Aurelius to Beethoven, from Tesla to Nietzsche, from visionary generals to misunderstood philosophers, history is filled with men who gave the world everything, and yet died with no hand holding theirs. Today, we live in a world that glorifies ambition and romanticizes emotional connection. But what happens when these two forces collide? Can the man who seeks transcendence also be loved for his humanity? This video is not about bitterness. It is about truth. We are about to explore a theme that is as psychological as it is historical, as spiritual as it is social. We will dive into forgotten journals, buried instincts, and uncomfortable facts. We will speak not just of men and women, but of the cost of becoming extraordinary in a world that craves the familiar. So ask yourself, what does it really mean to be great? And, more dangerously, what does it cost? Let us begin. To understand the friction between greatness and desire, we must journey back, not just decades, but millennia. Because this conflict, this aching dissonance between masculine excellence and feminine acceptance, is not a glitch in modern love. It is a recurring pattern etched into the architecture of civilizations. Let us begin with the ancient world. In Greece, the concept of greatness was bound to the heroic ideal. Achilles, the fierce warrior of the Iliad, was not built for domestic life. He was rage and brilliance incarnate, revered, feared, and ultimately alone. His love for Briseis, a woman taken from him, ignited a war. But love, for Achilles, was never home. It was fuel, temporary, fragile. Then came Rome, where men like Julius Caesar and Marcus Aurelius carried empires on their shoulders. Caesar, a man of boundless ambition, took lovers like Cleopatra, yet never settled. Greatness demanded too much. Even Marcus, the philosopher king, wrote of his loneliness in his Meditations. Surrounded by wealth and power, he was haunted by the coldness of those closest to him. His greatness elevated him, but also isolated him. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and we find the chivalric paradox. Knights were taught to serve women, to die for honor, to place feminine virtue on a pedestal. But the very code of chivalry was not designed for partnership. It was performative, idealized. Courtly love was often platonic, distant, impossible. The great man of this era was not meant to be known deeply. He was to be admired from afar, his wounds hidden behind armor and silence. In the Renaissance, brilliance bloomed. Artists like Michelangelo and thinkers like Machiavelli lived for creation and influence, not connection. The more visionary a man became, the more his relationships were fractured, and women, often denied education and agency, became spectators to male genius, not equals within it. But this is not about blaming women. It is about understanding a painful truth. Greatness often rewrites the emotional landscape of the man who carries it. By the time we reach the 18th and 19th centuries, we meet men like Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that still commands awe. A man who rose from obscurity, transformed Europe, and etched his name into the soul of history. But behind the battlefields and proclamations was a man obsessed with a woman, Josephine, who cheated on him, resisted his love, and remained emotionally elusive. Despite all his victories, Napoleon wrote letters soaked in insecurity, jealousy, and desperation. In one, he pleaded, "I do not love you, I detest you. You are a wretch, very awkward, very stupid, very unfeeling. But I still love you." Imagine that. A man who conquered nations could not conquer the heart he craved. Why? Because great men are rarely emotionally convenient. Their minds live in the future. Their focus is obsessive. They do not offer predictable affection or everyday availability. Their love is not calm. It is volcanic. They are not built for comfort. They are built for conquest, intellectual, creative, spiritual, or literal. And that can be deeply unsettling for those who long for safety, routine, and emotional reciprocity. Let us pause here and ask, has this changed in modern times? On the surface, yes. Women have more freedom, more power, and more voice than ever before. Relationships are more egalitarian. Gender roles are dissolving. And yet, beneath this evolution lies something ancient, something primal. The great man, whether an entrepreneur, philosopher, artist, or spiritual seeker, is still often met with resistance in love. He is told to soften, to slow down, to be more emotionally available, less driven, more predictable. In other words, less himself. Even in modern dating culture, we see this tension play out daily. Swipe through enough profiles and you will notice something peculiar. Ambition is admired, but only to a point. Power is attractive until it becomes overwhelming. Vision is sexy until it asks for solitude. Great men are told they are too intense, too complicated, too focused on work. In essence, too much. But why? What is behind this resistance? Some say it is cultural, that our society promotes emotional equality and resents imbalance. That modern women have grown tired of men who disappear into their dreams and leave their partners emotionally starving. There is truth in this. There are many men who use greatness as a mask for emotional avoidance. There are wounds that need healing. But there is another, more uncomfortable layer. At its core, the psyche fears what it cannot control. And the great man, truly great, is not controllable. He is not tamed by comfort, nor seduced by approval. He is not predictable. He is not safe. And in a world that increasingly values emotional stability and equality above all else, this archetype feels threatening. Not maliciously, but energetically. The woman who wants a great man must be ready for the fire. She must have her own center. She must be able to hold space for a mind that never stops turning and a heart that loves in ways that defy tradition. And many are not prepared for that. So instead, the world whispers to men, tone it down. Be softer. Be more available. Be more manageable. This is not about becoming more emotionally intelligent. That is always a good thing. This is about shrinking one's essence for the sake of belonging. Throughout history, the great man has always stood on the edge of society, not because he is cast out, but because his very nature places him at odds with conventional desires. We admire his achievements. We quote his words. We build statues in his honor. But rarely do we ask, who held him when he cried? Who loved him without needing him to be less? Who stayed even when his passion overshadowed his predictability? This is the tragedy of greatness. It gives everything to the world. except perhaps the one thing every human soul secretly craves: to be deeply seen and loved as they are. As we continue, we must look not only at the historical pattern, but at the psychological forces underneath it, because to truly understand why most women do not want great men, not in their full, wild, uncompromising essence, we must look at what greatness does to the male psyche, and what it awakens, both attractively and fearfully, in the feminine response. We are not here to blame. We are here to witness. Because when we strip away the stories, the empires, and the seductions, what remains is a universal ache, the longing to be loved, not for who we are told to become, but for who we already are, in all our complicated truth. And this is where psychology begins to speak. To truly grasp why most women do not want great men, at least not in the way these men need to be wanted, we must turn to the inner world, the tangled psychology beneath the surface. Greatness is often perceived as an external achievement, power, status, brilliance, but it is, at its core, a psychological and emotional journey. It reshapes identity and transforms how a man relates not only to the world, but to himself and others. One of the foundational concepts here is the archetype of the hero, a figure Carl Jung described as a universal pattern residing in the collective unconscious. The hero leaves the familiar to confront the unknown, battles chaos and returns transformed, often bearing gifts for society. But this journey is solitary, dangerous, and deeply isolating. The hero archetype demands sacrifice. It demands that the man separate himself from his tribe, from comfort, from predictable intimacy. The very process of becoming great often requires a man to embody qualities that clash with traditional emotional closeness: detachment, relentless focus, emotional resilience, and at times, ruthless ambition. Jung also spoke about the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche that holds our denied impulses and fears. For the great man, the shadow can be vast and wild. It contains his anger, his loneliness, his vulnerability. He must face it alone, or risk being consumed. When a man embarks on the path of greatness, he often pushes these darker parts deeper inside, because showing them threatens his image of control and strength. But this repression can make emotional intimacy with others, especially women, fraught with difficulty. He may appear distant, unavailable, or even cold. On the other side, the feminine psyche responds to this hero in complex ways. Modern psychology suggests that attachment theory plays a role here. Many women, like men, have internalized expectations about emotional safety and predictability based on early relationships. When faced with a man whose inner world is turbulent, unyielding, or distant, their instinct may be to pull away to preserve their own sense of security. This is not a failure or fault, it's survival. The great man's intensity can trigger fears of abandonment or engulfment. He may come with a powerful emotional charge that is hard to hold. It's easier, sometimes, to admire from afar than to navigate the storm. Adding another layer, evolutionary psychology offers insights but must be approached carefully. Some theorists propose that women, historically, sought men who could provide protection and resources, but also those who displayed emotional availability and commitment. A man solely obsessed with conquest, whether territorial, intellectual, or creative, might signal unpredictability, which is a risky trait for long-term partnership. This tension is evident in cultural narratives. The tortured genius, or the mad artist, who burns with fire but struggles with relationships, is a trope repeated across centuries. But here is where ancient wisdom blends with modern science. Sufi mystics spoke of the lover who must embrace the beloved, while also being prepared to be consumed by the fire of divine passion. The great man's journey is similar: to love deeply, yet remain unconsumed by the need for approval or control. In other words, greatness demands a balance between connection and solitude, between power and vulnerability. Neuroscience shows us that human brains are wired to seek attachment and emotional regulation, but also autonomy and mastery. These drives can conflict, especially in relationships where one partner is deeply driven to excel. The great man often struggles to regulate his emotions in ways that feel safe to his partner, while his partner struggles to accommodate the unpredictability of his inner world. A metaphor may help here. Imagine a lighthouse on a jagged coast. It shines brilliantly, guiding ships safely to shore. But the light is fixed, unyielding, and its keeper often alone. The ships admire the light but rarely anchor nearby. They fear the rocks beneath. Great men are like that lighthouse. Their brilliance guides, but their emotional availability can be fixed, distant, or solitary. This does not mean greatness is incompatible with love. Rather, it means that the traditional scripts of romantic partnership, comfort, predictability, closeness, often do not fit the reality of men who live on the edge of vision and obsession. Here is a subtle but crucial point. Many women desire the idea of a great man, not the full, raw reality. The image is safer, more digestible. It fits cultural expectations of admiration and support. But the true man behind the myth is more complex, more demanding, and often more frightening. This clash of expectations leads to confusion, resentment, and heartbreak. Men who strive for greatness feel they must hide parts of themselves to be loved, and women feel betrayed when the man behind the pedestal reveals shadows and storms. Another psychological concept here is the paradox of intimacy and autonomy. Relationships require vulnerability and closeness, but also respect for individuality and personal growth. Great men, by their nature, often prize autonomy and purpose above all. This can be misread as emotional unavailability or selfishness. But it is really a quest for integrity, being true to their calling, even if it conflicts with conventional relationship needs. In turn, women who seek safety and connection may interpret this integrity as distance or rejection. This dynamic can create a loop of misunderstanding. The great man retreats to protect his inner world. The partner withdraws to protect her heart. At its core, the tension is not between men and women, but between two fundamental human needs: to be known deeply and to be free. So, how do we reconcile these? The answer lies in recognizing that the path of greatness is not a rejection of love. It is a different expression of it. Love for the self, for the vision, and for the world. But it also requires a partner capable of holding paradox, the coexistence of fire and tenderness, ambition and care. This is why history is filled with great men who were misunderstood, alone, or unsettled in their relationships. Because greatness is not merely about success. It is about embodying a deep, often uncomfortable truth, that to be fully alive and powerful is to live on the edge of belonging and isolation. And to love and be loved in this state demands courage from both. Pause for a moment. Reflect. Have you ever felt the push and pull between your deepest ambitions and your need for connection? Have you ever witnessed the loneliness of greatness, whether in yourself or others? These are questions that reveal the heart of this age-old tension. As we move forward, we will explore the consequences of this tension, how it shapes identity, relationships, and self-worth, and what it means to navigate love when you are not just a man, but a force. The tension between greatness and intimacy is not just a philosophical puzzle. It has real, tangible consequences for the men who seek to live fully and for the women who stand beside them. It shapes identities, relationships, and the emotional landscapes of all involved. For the great man, the pursuit of purpose and vision often comes at a steep emotional cost. Isolation is perhaps the most immediate. Greatness demands focus and sacrifice, but it also erects walls between the man and others. He may feel misunderstood or unseen beneath the mask of achievement. This is a profound loneliness, a solitude that no crowd, no applause, no admiration can fully dissolve. Many great men throughout history have wrestled with this isolation. Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, whose life is a powerful illustration of this paradox, was surrounded by thousands of soldiers and courtiers, yet suffered deep personal loneliness. His greatness was both his crown and his cage. His relationships with women were complicated and often strained by the very intensity that made him a legend. This loneliness does not only manifest as physical solitude, but also as emotional distance. The great man's emotional world is often guarded, his vulnerabilities hidden beneath layers of strength and control. He may fear that exposing his full self will shatter the image he has built, and with it, his influence and sense of security. The consequence is a barrier to genuine intimacy. Partners who desire closeness may find themselves facing an emotional wall, no matter how much admiration or love they feel. This can lead to frustration, confusion, and sometimes withdrawal. Women who enter into relationships with great men may initially be captivated by the aura of power and vision, but later encounter a harsher reality: the unpredictability, the emotional unavailability, the relentless focus on something beyond the relationship. This mismatch can cause pain on both sides. Women may feel unfulfilled or neglected, their needs pushed aside by the man's overwhelming ambition. This dynamic can erode self-worth in subtle ways. A woman might begin to question her own value if she perceives that she is not enough for the man she loves. The man, in turn, may internalize a sense of failure for not being able to meet the emotional demands expected of him. The result is a cycle of misunderstanding and emotional distancing. Socially, this tension also reflects broader cultural shifts. In traditional societies, the roles and expectations were more clearly defined. Men were providers and protectors, women nurturers and keepers of the home. The great man was a leader, often a warrior or ruler, and women's roles were aligned with supporting that greatness. Emotional intimacy was often secondary to survival and social order. Modernity, however, demands something more complex. Emotional openness, partnership, and equality are now prized ideals. The great man who clings to old modes of power may find himself at odds with contemporary expectations. The woman seeking emotional connection may feel alienated by the man's stoicism or intensity. This cultural mismatch can deepen the sense of failure and confusion on both sides. On a personal level, the consequences ripple into career and identity. A man who feels emotionally stifled may experience burnout or disillusionment. Without genuine connection, the victories can feel hollow, the public praise like hollow echoes. Women, too, may struggle with resentment or sadness when love does not meet their emotional needs. This can lead to relationship breakdowns or cycles of dissatisfaction. Historically, we see echoes of this pattern in myths and stories. The legend of King Arthur and Guinevere, for example, embodies the tension between duty and desire, greatness and intimacy. Arthur's role as king demands sacrifices that strain his marriage. The tragic love triangle that ensues reflects the impossibility of fully reconciling the demands of power with those of the heart. Similarly, the figure of Prometheus, who stole fire to give to humanity and suffered eternal torment, symbolizes the price of greatness. The great man often bears burdens unseen by the world, burdens that complicate his relationships and emotional life. Yet, this narrative is not meant to justify emotional neglect or distance. Rather, it illuminates the complexity of the human condition. Greatness and love are not mutually exclusive, but they require deep self-awareness and empathy to coexist. When misunderstood, this dynamic can breed bitterness and regret. When embraced with honesty, it can lead to profound growth and connection. Pause here. Think about the relationships in your own life. Have you seen this pattern of intensity and distance? Have you felt the sting of loneliness despite outward success or admiration? Understanding the emotional consequences helps us move from blame to compassion. It invites us to see great men not as cold or uncaring, but as human beings wrestling with profound paradoxes. And it invites women not to blame themselves for unmet needs, but to recognize the complexity beneath the surface. In this space, there is room for healing, not by sacrificing ambition or love, but by learning to hold both with integrity. The great man who can face his own vulnerability and the woman who can hold that complexity with empathy create the possibility for a different kind of relationship, one that honors both greatness and emotional depth. This is a journey, not a destination. It demands courage from both partners to break free from old patterns and expectations. It requires patience, forgiveness, and a willingness to explore uncomfortable truths. And, above all, it calls for a new language of love, one that can speak to the fire and the tenderness within us all. As we continue, we will explore practical approaches to navigating this tension, tools to foster emotional connection without compromising greatness, and ways to cultivate relationships that support both partners' growth. Because the truth is this: no man can truly be great alone, and no love can thrive without depth. Navigating the complex tension between greatness and intimacy demands more than insight. It requires practical tools and daily habits that nurture both the individual's purpose and their relationships. The good news is that modern psychology, ancient wisdom, and timeless practices offer pathways for great men and their partners to bridge this divide. First, let us acknowledge an essential truth. Greatness and love are not mutually exclusive, but complementary. They demand balance, honesty, and above all, self-awareness. One foundational practice is radical self-awareness, the capacity to observe one's own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without judgment. This is not merely introspection, but an active engagement with one's inner world. A great man must learn to notice when ambition or stress is eclipsing emotional availability. Journaling can be a powerful tool here. Writing regularly about one's fears, desires, and frustrations creates space to face the shadow parts that Jung described the anger, loneliness, or vulnerability often buried beneath the surface. Through journaling, a man can develop what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and name nuanced emotions. This skill enhances emotional regulation, allowing one to respond to relationship challenges with clarity rather than reactivity. Complementing self-awareness is the practice of mindful presence. When with a partner, it means truly being there, listening without planning a response, observing without judgment, feeling without retreating into defense. Mindfulness meditation strengthens this capacity. It trains the mind to stay anchored in the present moment, reducing the impulse to withdraw into obsession or distraction. From ancient traditions, the wisdom of Stoicism offers another powerful framework. Stoics teach us to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. This acceptance cultivates resilience and reduces the tendency to blame or withdraw from emotional challenges in relationships. At the same time, Stoicism emphasizes the importance of virtue wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Applying these virtues in relationships means being courageous enough to be vulnerable, wise enough to listen, just enough to respect boundaries, and temperate enough to regulate intense emotions. Another critical practice is setting clear boundaries. Great men often struggle with this because their ambition drives them to overextend themselves in work or personal projects. Boundaries around time, energy, and emotional availability create the container necessary for sustainable relationships. This requires honest communication with partners. Saying no to certain demands or distractions is not rejection. It is a commitment to integrity for oneself and the relationship. For the partner, cultivating empathy and emotional resilience is equally vital. Understanding that the great man's intensity is not a personal slight but part of his inner journey helps transform frustration into compassion. Therapeutic approaches such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can assist partners in identifying and reframing unhelpful thoughts that fuel resentment or insecurity. Together, couples can develop shared rituals that foster connection despite busy lives. This might be a daily check-in, a walk without phones, or a simple gesture of presence. These rituals are bridges across the emotional distance that ambition can create. On a deeper level, embracing the paradox of love and solitude is transformative. The great man must honor his need for solitude as sacred, a space for creativity, reflection, and renewal, without using it as an excuse for emotional absence. His partner, likewise, can cultivate self-love and autonomy, supporting her own growth rather than relying solely on the relationship for fulfillment. This echoes Sufi teachings of the lover and the beloved, two flames burning separately but illuminating one another. In practical terms, this means both partners developing interests, friendships, and practices that nourish their individuality. Relationship counseling or coaching with professionals who understand these dynamics can be invaluable. They can guide couples through the complexities of balancing ambition and intimacy, helping to build communication skills and emotional intelligence. At the core, these practices point toward one fundamental skill: emotional courage. It is the courage to be seen not just as a successful or powerful man, but as a flawed, vulnerable human being. It is the courage to love fully, even when it is risky. It is the courage for both partners to hold space for each other, as contradictions, the drive and the tenderness, the ambition and the need for closeness. This courage transforms the relationship from a battlefield of unmet needs into a sanctuary of mutual growth. Pause and reflect. What would it look like for you to embrace emotional courage in your own life? How might you begin to hold both greatness and love, without sacrificing either? Remember, this is a journey. It unfolds one step, one conversation, one act of presence at a time. Greatness is not a solitary peak, but a shared horizon. And when love walks beside ambition, the journey becomes not just bearable but profoundly meaningful. As we draw this exploration to a close, it becomes clear that the shocking truth Napoleon hinted at is far more nuanced than simple rejection. Most women do not reject greatness itself. They resist the cost that unbalanced greatness can impose on intimacy, emotional connection, and mutual growth. This tension between greatness and closeness is an ancient human drama, written into our histories, our myths, and the very architecture of our hearts. The journey of the great man is not one of mere achievement or power. It is a deeply human struggle to integrate ambition with vulnerability, vision with empathy, and leadership with love. History offers us countless examples: Napoleon, King Arthur, Prometheus, all shining with brilliance yet shadowed by loneliness and sacrifice. Their stories remind us that greatness, while extraordinary, can also be isolating if not grounded in emotional presence and humility. Yet this is not a tale of despair, but one of hope. The evolution from rigid roles and expectations to more nuanced understandings of human complexity invites us to reimagine what it means to be great. Modern psychology and ancient wisdom converge to teach us that true greatness embraces wholeness, not just public achievement but private authenticity. It honors the full spectrum of human emotion, from strength to tenderness. For the men who walk the path of greatness, this means cultivating radical self-awareness, emotional courage, and mindful presence. It means learning to sit with vulnerability and to communicate openly with those they love. It means recognizing that solitude and intimacy are not opposites, but companions on the journey. For the women who stand beside these men, it means practicing empathy, patience, and emotional resilience. It means understanding the paradoxical nature of greatness and holding space for complexity without losing oneself. It means fostering connection through shared rituals and honest dialogue. Together, they can create relationships that transcend the old narratives of sacrifice and loneliness. Relationships that are not just functional, but transformational. Pause for a moment. Consider your own life. How have you witnessed this tension between greatness and intimacy? Have you felt its pull in your own relationships or within yourself? The journey toward integration is deeply personal, but also profoundly universal. It calls each of us to reflect on the balance we hold between ambition and connection, power and vulnerability. History shows us that greatness without love is incomplete, just as love without purpose can feel aimless. The challenge and the invitation is to live fully in both realms, cultivating relationships that honor both our highest visions and our deepest hearts. This is the legacy Napoleon's truth whispers across centuries, that greatness demands more than skill or strength. It demands emotional integrity, courage to be seen, and a willingness to love beyond the ego's armor. In embracing this truth, we reclaim not only our own power but also our capacity for deep, meaningful connection. As you step forward, ask yourself, how can I honor both my greatness and my need for love? How can I build bridges where once there were walls? The answers lie in the practice of presence, the courage to be vulnerable, and the commitment to growth, not alone, but together. We are not meant to journey this path in isolation. Greatness finds its fullest expression when it is shared, when it becomes a light that illuminates not only our own lives, but those of others. May this understanding inspire you to live with greater self-awareness, compassion, and purpose. The road ahead is complex, but it is also rich with possibility. And in that possibility, we find the true meaning of greatness, the power to transform ourselves and the world through love. You have journeyed with me through history, psychology, and the delicate dance between greatness and love. This space is not just about ideas. It is a place where we meet ourselves with honesty and compassion, where we grow beyond old patterns and claim our true power. You, the viewer, are part of this conversation. Your struggles, your triumphs, your questions, they matter deeply here. Together, we explore what it means to lead with integrity, to master the self, and to build relationships that nourish rather than drain. This is a journey of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and meaningful reflection, not fleeting motivation or surface-level fixes. If you feel the call to deepen your understanding, to wrestle with the truths that shape your life, and to find practical tools for growth, then this channel is for you. Here we blend timeless wisdom with modern science. We honor the lessons of history while embracing the complexity of the human heart. And we do it all with warmth, curiosity, and respect for the messy, beautiful process of becoming. So I invite you to join us, subscribe, and become part of a community that values depth over distraction, authenticity over applause. Together, we will uncover the patterns that hold us back, learn how to set healthy boundaries, and cultivate the emotional courage to live fully. Because greatness is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. And no one should walk that path alone. Are you ready to reclaim your power and live with purpose? Let us walk this road together. Subscribe now and step into a space where growth is real, reflection is valued, and your journey matters.